I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. Welcome to the Revelation 13 podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Revelation 13 podcast. I'm your host, Mike Hopwood. The Supreme Court has recently ruled on the constitutionality of Obamacare. Unfortunately for Americans, the court upheld the legislation. Most shocking is that the key vote that saved the law came from Chief Justice John Roberts, who was supposedly conservative and a constitutionalist. Even though he found fault with the individual mandate, which forces all Americans to buy health insurance or else face fines, he decided to look the other way and state that the act could be considered a tax and that could make it constitutionally legal. He didn't feel it was the court's responsibility to strike the law down. This thinking is of course absurd. The Supreme Court is there as part of the checks and balances between the 3 branches of government in the U.S. Republic. If laws do not pass the constitutional muster, they are to be declared unconstitutional, especially when they concern people's freedom and liberties. In recent years, the Supreme Court has not ruled against the expansion of federal power, and the trend has continued. What Chief Justice Roberts may not realize is that by kicking the can of getting rid of Obamacare to the American people in Congress, he has legitimized an unprecedented government intrusion into people's lives and freedoms. Never has this occurred before. Requiring people to purchase a service or else face penalties. The Constitution was written to limit the powers of government by defining what it can and can't do. The founders realized the government has to have limits to its power, or it can steamroll individuals' freedoms and turn a free nation into a nation of slaves to the government. Conspiracy theorists for years have stated their belief that the powers behind the scenes, whether they call them the Illuminati or New World Order, has been working towards a one-world government and the removal of U.S. sovereignty. One of these steps towards this agenda was a plan to create a socialized healthcare system in America. Since the 70s, possibly before, this agenda had been discovered and indicated the desire by these individuals to install the universal healthcare plan by the year 2000. Not surprisingly, when Bill Clinton became president in 1992, one of the first things he attempted was the installment of a socialized healthcare plan. The backlash against it nearly cost him his second term as president and closed the door on the year 2000 window for universal healthcare until the election of Barack Obama, when it resurfaced, and by bribes and coercion they were able to get a starting point for universal health care. Even though it by far was not what the majority of the people in the United States wanted, politicians showed their true allegiances when they went against what their constituents wanted. They sided with their ideology and the party line, rather than the interest of their constituents. It cost many of them their political seats. People had hoped that when the healthcare law would come before the Supreme Court, they would strike it down before many of its provisions would start to kick in. A Supreme Court rejection of the law would have been a quick and relatively clean reaffirmation of constitutional rights and freedom. Now the only vehicle the American people have to protect their rights and repeal the law is to act at the voting booth. It will take a clean sweep for the Republicans to get the necessary votes to repeal the law. Firstly, to win the presidency. Romney has stated he will act to remove the law if elected. Secondly, Republicans must win a majority in the Senate to get the votes necessary to repeal. And lastly, Republicans must hold on to the House of Representatives to be able to move the repeal legislation to the Senate. If Obama gets reelected, the chances of the law ever going away is very slim. Many unexpected things can happen between now and the election that could help Obama one way or the other to stay in office. The election will go a long way in determining America's future, positive or negative. In the end, the people will decide their fate. If they don't stand up now, they may never get another chance. Unrest in Syria may now become the flashpoint that ignites a war in the Middle East. For several years, Iran's nuclear program has been the slow-boiling problem that seemed to be leading to armed conflict for the Israelis and Iranians. But now, as the civil unrest in Syria plays out, Israel may find its hand forced to protect itself from chemical weapons. Syria has one of the world's largest stockpiles of chemical weapons, consisting of nerve gas, VX, and sarin, as well as mustard gas. Syria has successfully weaponized their chemical weapons by enabling warheads on their missile systems with the capacity to deliver the chemical agents anywhere in Israel. If the Assad regime is removed, these weapons could fall into the hands of Al-Qaeda, as well as any number of groups who are seeking the destruction of Israel. But it's not only Israel that is concerned about the loss of control of these weapons. If terrorists acquire these weapons, they could be used throughout the Middle East against governments these groups would want to target, like Saudi Arabia. Israeli sources suggested that in May of 2000, U.S. Special Forces trained for nearly a month for a scenario very much like this. A Pentagon study suggested that it would take 75,000 troops to secure Assad's chemical weapons, a large force that America and the world may not want to commit to, especially since the Iran issue has not gone away. And Iran has military alliances with Assad, as well as the Russians and Chinese who still back him. And so far they have blocked any meaningful efforts on the part of the UN or others to remove Assad from power. Any military action taken by Israel or the U.S. could potentially escalate from a regional conflict to a full-blown world war. In the end, Assad may stay in power because the cost of removing him may be too great. A prophecy concerning the city of Damascus in Syria may point to these current events, escalating out of control. Isaiah 17:1 tells of the burden of Damascus. Behold, Damascus will cease from being a city. It will be a ruinous heap. Damascus is one of the world's oldest continuously inhabited cities. It has never been abandoned or a ruinous heap, so this prophecy is yet to come. Many have speculated that the city might one day be hit with a nuclear bomb by Israel in response to a chemical weapons attack. While still a possibility, it may be that Assad himself may cause the destruction of Damascus. As this conflict unfolds, either the armed fighting in the city or Assad releasing chemical weapons upon his people, not unlike what Saddam Hussein had done to the Kurds living in Iraq. Assad has no real incentive to step down. In the most recent examples of Libya and Egypt, things did not fare well for Gaddafi or Hosni Mubarak, the two former dictators of their respective countries. The labeling of Assad as a butcher and a war criminal may prevent him from stepping down, even if his pride would allow for it. Fear of a trial that could lead to his death or loss of his freedom or confiscation of his wealth could be more than enough incentive for him to pull out all stops in the defense of his regime, especially when he still has the support of his closest allies, Iran and Hezbollah. In recent statements, these groups say they will fight with Assad if Syria is invaded by Turkey or any foreign government. NATO and the U.S. may work with Turkey to try and oust Assad from power. The thinking is that if Syria is invaded by a Muslim nation, it wouldn't raise as many problems as a non-Muslim nation or group of nations attacking. Even if Turkey alone attacks, the Iranians and Hezbollah will likely still defend Assad, and Assad has already had a skirmish with Turkey when Syrian aircraft shot down a Turkish aircraft, resulting in the death of 2 Turkish pilots. This incident happened nearly a year after Turkey threw its support behind the Syrian rebels. Assad was likely giving Turkey a message that he was not afraid to defend